Hi, welcome to the inaugural Twitch stream for Gen Con. I understand this is the first time we've ever had any kind of a live streaming event at Gen Con. So thanks for coming to the best 4 days in gaming and joining us for our first show, I guess, actually, of the show. Last night, I hosted something called the Diana Jones Award, which I'm going to explain briefly to you, which is a trophy that's given out by a shadowy cabal of game designers for the, exactly, that's the way we should have cabals in the game design industry, that actually is for the excellence in gaming, right? And this has gone out to many different people over the years. We've been doing it for 18 years in a row now. And this has gone out to people from Peter Atkinson to Jordan Weissman to all sorts of different people, and then to different games and to different activities even. We actually, a few years ago, gave it to the Irish Gaming Charity Auctions, for instance, right? So we're kind of eclectic, and really our only definition is what this small group of us thinks is excellent in games that year. This year, we had a number of nominees, and the nominees were the 200-word RPG Challenge, which is a competition organized by a couple of guys named David Sherdowan and Marshall Miller. And that's something where you're challenged to actually write a role-playing game within 200 words, which is pretty amazing. Something called the Actual Play Movement, which is a movement within hobby games about actually broadcasting on things like Twitch, right? Interestingly enough. Then we have something called Analogue Game Studies, which we have some people over here who are involved with. A journal edited by Aaron Trammell, Evan Torner, Shelley Jones, and Emma Lee Waldron. Fourth up, we had a game called Charterstone, which is an excellent legacy-style game by Jamie Stegmaier, published by Stegmaier Games. And last was Harlem Unbound by Chris Spivey and his crew over at Darker Hue Studios, which is a role-playing game supplement for Call of Cthulhu and other Cthulhuid-type games that's actually set in the Harlem Renaissance, which is pretty fantastic. And it's really neat how it takes the inherent racism of H.P. Lovecraft and kind of turns it on its head for people to be able to play. So, last night we gave out the award at this crazy party that we had something like 300 or 400 people show up for, and the award went to Actual Play, actually. Yay. There we go, hey! So, we're going to be here for a couple hours just chatting with people who have had either were part of the nominees, have gotten the award in the past, or were the winners this year. So let's start with some of the winners, actually, I think, over here. Let's go this way, we'll introduce ourselves, and then we'll go this way. And then we'll talk a little bit about that.
Okay, I'm Satine Phoenix. I'm the community manager for Wizards of the Coast Dungeons & Dragons and the co-creator of Maze Arcana, which happens to be an actual play live stream production company.
Fantastic.
My name's Dom Zook. I run Saving Throw, which is also actual play live streaming community.
I'm James D'Amato. I'm the co-founder of the One Shot Podcast Network, where we focus on plenty of actual play and discussion programs surrounding games. And with me is Jim McClure.
Hi, yes, I'm Jim McClure. I'm owner of Third Act Publishing. We're a small press RPG publishing company, as well as I'm a consultant on the 200-word RPG contest, which I guess we'll probably be talking about later. And also, I wasn't on the wonderful committee, I guess, that won for that, but I did an actual play podcast as well called Satanic Panic.
We welcome all winners, right? It's a movement. That's the funny thing. We have representatives from the movement, but nobody actually owns the movement, right? It's just a group of people doing something wonderful together.
Hi, I'm Aaron Trammell. I'm one of the editors at Analogue Game Studies, and we're an academic journal devoted to the study of analog games, basically, which is almost anything that happens at Gen Con, which is awesome.
I'm Evan Torner, and also an editor on the Analogue Game Studies journal.
And I'm Shelley Jones, and I also edit for Analogue Game Studies as of this year.
Very cool. A lot of wonderful people. Now I have to actually come up with questions for everybody. I was out very late last night. The party ran kind of long. But let's start with the Analog Games guys here. Tell us about your project and how it works and what your ambitions are and why it's so wonderful. You'll be able to tell better than I will.
Okay. So we founded this journal late night in a bar in Washington, D.C. in 2013 at the Popular Culture Association. And we were like, dude, there's too much video game coverage in game studies. Game studies is actually a cipher for video games produced between the years of 2005 and 2015. And that's sort of like the decade of excellence in game studies that everybody looks at. That's BioWare RPGs and everything. And we thought, this is BS. Let's create our own journal and let's do it our own way. And that means we threw out most of the things we didn't like about academic journals. So the snobbery. So we publish academics and designers and whoever wants to write an article. do you want to write an article? Please do. We're very open to whatever people have to say about analog games. We threw out double-blind peer review. We threw out paywalls and gatekeeping. There was a like-minded publisher, thankfully, Etc. Press at Carnegie Mellon University, who signed on with us then a year into our existence, and we are now available not only in a blog format, but also as a free downloadable PDF, as well as print on demand. And you can buy printed copies of the journal here at IPR in booth 2459. But you can also just buy them print on demand online. And of course, like we don't want to gatekeep anybody. We want to keep the conversation flowing, and we want the designers and the scholars to be involved. Although in the last year, it's been a lot more scholars than designers, and we'd like to shift back and forth. We talk about card games, we talk about role-playing games, we talk about board games, we talk about cocktail cabinets, location-based gaming sometimes. So the digital is in there, but it's, we try to talk about the non-digital aspects of the digital, which is something. And then, of course, role-playing games, because all three of us are role-playing game scholars, so.
At Gen Con, that's crazy, right? Actually, I saw you guys did an article on actual play in one of your recent issues as well. So that kind of crosses over pretty strongly with what these guys over here are doing. So can you guys tell me about actual play, actually? Satine, you want to start over?
It's like you play the games.
Actually play.
And you play it for real. And also there are cameras so that other people, or just mics so people can listen. Yeah, it's basically it. I think a bunch of us are just performers or people who just like to add that other element in their gaming.
No, I think that's an amazing part where they have a lot of the most successful ones seem to be with people who are voice actors or performers in some sense, and they're very comfortable with cameras, right? My kids do a lot of watching of actual play. I'm more of an actual player than I am a watcher of these or consumer of these. But I think it's just amazing how it's teaching people to play games in different ways.
One of the things, and you guys probably find this too, is you actually learn how to listen better by doing actual play, because one of the things is about being a performer is to play off of the people that you're with and to listen to them and kind of throw the ball at them, they throw it back to you. So you're not like, when you're at home or you're at a game store, you're kind of in your own world and you got your character sheet and you're waiting for everyone else to do what they need to do. And then it's your turn, and then you make your decision. Well, in the actual play, it's more like my dream way of playing, which is with everybody.
Yeah, that's such a fantastic point. One of the things that I love about actual play in podcasts and in streaming is that it really does force the give and take of focus, which is something that, like, as an improviser, I always really value, and I view improv and role-playing games to be very much the same sort of animal. And I think actual play, like, because you're doing it as performance, it encourages you to engage with the game from that performer mindset, and that does make it like a really collaborative thing. That's really beautiful.
Yes?
Oh, I 100% agree. Yeah, even beyond the performance aspect, there's sort of a technical aspect, right? Because everyone is mic'd up, kind of similar to how we are right now. And around a table, as Satine was talking about, when you're at home, everyone kind of has side conversations like, which spell should I use? Which should I do? But in a podcast or a live stream, you can't really do that, because then you're just drawing focus from everyone else. So it really hyper focuses everyone's ability. And I think as an audience member watching that, you key into the character more and the story more, because you're not distracted by anything anymore. So you're purely looking at the character and the story as it progresses, which I think is a fascinating. It's my ideal way of playing. So.
Yeah. Even watching all the players pay attention to that player is powerful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. One of my favorite things about actual play is how it lowers the bar for engagement in the community. Like, we have added tens of thousands of new fans of games because all you have to do to become part of the gaming community now is watch something. It's much less than like, oh, I've got to buy a book, I've got to learn how to play the game, I've got to wrangle my friends into doing that. It's like, well, no, it's a click away on the internet, and that is just the start of something really beautiful.
Yeah, it's been interesting watching our community start. I mean, we started back in 2014 or so, and watching people start watching us, and then this year they're like, I've been watching you guys for 3 or 4 years now, and this year I finally bought the starter kit for D&D, and I'm going to get started. And it's like, that's awesome, man. That's so cool, and it's amazing. But they're just like, I just like watching you guys play, and that's so crazy to me. I'm like, we're just playing a game.
But it's Netflixing.
Yeah.
They get hours of content.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
But this is stuff you would do anyway, right? You play these games anyway, and to have somebody focus on that and watch you play, it's just kind of wild, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, I'm doing this for my benefit, not for yours, right?
Yeah, I was talking about that last night when we were on stage. Like 1995, I was playing the game at high school, and my friends are like, let's record this.
I'm old.
Let's make a recording, and then we'll write a novel. It'll be really crazy. It's just a wild idea. And then that evolution of that, I mean, that stuck with me as a performer, because I was doing it right before drama club. But that stuck with me, and I think all of us kind of had that the bug in our ear when we were younger. Like, we could make something out of this community or game.
Man, when I started playing these games, I always thought, it's a shame that I can't export this experience or explain to someone else what it's like. I wish I had been able to tell myself, oh, it's as simple as putting a microphone in front of it. And that's it.
Well,
No,
I mean,
it's funny how it's that easy. I mean, I've had this conversation with Robin Laws and a bunch of other game designers over the years where it's one of the problems with games is that it's such an amazing experience when people really know what they're doing and are good at it, right? But you can't really export that, or you weren't able to do it up until actual play. You weren't able to show people. You didn't have an example other than little bits of text in the back of the Dungeons and Dragons rulebook, whatever, that showed people walking down a corridor and Gary Gygax saying, make a human pyramid and you're going to solve problems this way. But to see people actually having fun, right? To actually be able to watch and experience that and share that with them, that's kind of magical in a way. I think it's amazing.
And also, like, the way it helps folks overcome loneliness. Like, the hobby in the 1960s was a lot of people playing diplomacy, playing Dungeons and Dragons, and you get these games that needed, like, 6-10 players. You'd be living in the middle of nowhere, and you'd have, like, 2 friends. How do you overcome that?
Right, and in the case of diplomacy, you had less friends at the end of it.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of emails, I'm sure you guys do too, about how important just watching people work together is. I'm actually writing a book about how D&D helped me through PTSD. And in my research, it was this, like, just to get over PTSD, it's about cooperative, just working together with a group of people on a consistent basis. And it's been amazing kind of putting that thread out in the universe and people recognizing it and like, wow, that is. And just being in the chat rooms, they feel like they're a part of it. We can say, hey, you remember that time when we did the thing? And then they're like, I remember the time when you did that thing. And they're just the loneliness. Like, I certainly felt that my whole life. And it wasn't until the last couple years that I'm like, I'm not a weirdo. Well, I am a weirdo, but we're all weirdos
wonderful
together.
weirdo, right?
It's really amazing. Like, who doesn't come to this hobby from this place of loneliness and being like, hey, there's other weirdos out there just like me.
Yeah,
It's so
the
cool.
parasocial relationship that you get out of like an actual play thing, or like sitting in on somebody's table and enjoying that fiction with them, is really strong. Like, I not only produce actual play, but I watch and listen to quite a few, and I do feel very deep connections to those folks. I think there's something powerful about being part of that game, even if it's just as an observer.
It's like the sports. I get it now.
Yeah.
I understand. It's like there's that bond, and I meet you guys, and I already have an affinity for you because we have that common thing that we all do. It's like, oh, you're cool. No, you're family. It's cool.
It's also a very intimate experience, I think, because as you go, I mean, we have all sorts of shows on the channel, and they all are spread out across the spectrum of performance. But every person, every cast member is they're putting stuff out there, right? And when the chat room and the community kind of comes back and reflects on that and talks about that and connects with it. It's such an intimate connection that we have with everyone who is sharing that experience, you know? And it's I don't know, it's really special to me. It's beyond even just like doing like performing Hamilton or something like that. Like that would be amazing. If you know, I don't know, Lynn, if you're out there, happy to have you come on the show. But even beyond that, where you're sort of disconnected, I'm on a script, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. With the actual play, there's no script, you know, you're just kind of going and creating the story as you go, and you don't know where you're going to end up. Like, I'll start saying something, and then I end it, and I'm like, oh, what did I just say? Why did I do that, you know? And it's an amazing experience. It's an amazing performance experience, I think. But yeah, the connection is, I don't know.
That intimacy point that you made, I really, really resonates with me, because I think largely role-playing games are an expression of intimacy in a way, because you are putting out there scenarios and ideas that resonate with you, that you like. You're bearing your soul in a way. And when you do that through actual play, like, you're doing that to a wide audience. You're sharing a lot, and there's no like level of separation where if you're writing a novel or a television show, you have editors. It's all right there, and like you said, you can get lost in it sometimes.
It can be very raw, I think, that way, right? And I think that's what part of what people respond to. I mean, it's reality television in a way, whereas it's even better than that, in that there's no cuts, no edits, especially if it's done live like
and
this.
it's cheaper to produce.
Much cheaper, exactly.
As a media scholar, I find the podcasting and streaming phenomenon very flexible. If you follow the scholar Marshall McLuhan, he talked about hot media and cold media. And hot media demand a lot of your attention. That's film and books, right? You can't like read a book and cook at the same time unless it's a cookbook. Or you know, when you're watching a movie, it's presumed that you're like focusing on that flickering in a cinema, whereas television and radio are cool media. You sort of hang back, you can have them on while other things are happening. And these streaming services are both, right? They're both intimate and in your face, and you can follow very intensely the players, the characters, everything's all interacting, and then you can just have them on while you're making a pizza or doing other work. And I have a lot of my students stream Critical Role, and others just while doing their homework, and so you're a comforting voice sort of in the backdrop, and at the same time they can jump in and really engage as part of the community. So it's a wildly, like, I think it breaks down the entire hot and cold media boundary.
Well, one thing that I actually kind of wanted to pick up on is I'm very excited about where actual play is now. But I think we're just about to see is turn a corner too, where actual play is going to start influencing games more and more. We're running games over on the one-shot streams where we have our audience playing along with us and influencing the story, using Twitch's bit system to purchase like plot twists and whatnot that they throw us. So like, the game is now a game that's happening with 6 people at a table, but it's also a game that's happening with hundreds of people like going, ooh, I have this idea and I want to get involved with it now. I cannot wait to see how games are going to change in the next few years because we're working together.
Let me just pick up on that point, because it's something, it's getting announced this weekend, so I guess this is a little bit of an early announcement, and hopefully the person who holds the NDA on me doesn't mad about this. But many of you are probably familiar with Roll20. It's an online site that people go and play. Roll20 has essentially designed its first tabletop role-playing game. I spent last year with a team, essentially as the lead designer for it, working, developing that game, and to hit on that point, one of the things that we had lengthy conversations throughout the entire process was, this is a game that's going to be streamed when it's played. This is a game that's going to be displayed not to 6 people in their house. This is going to be displayed to a large audience, because that's how games are played and displayed these days, and that went a large degree into the design process of making that game and making it appeal specifically to that type of audience.
Very, very cool. Actually, while we have Jim here, could you tell us a little bit about the 200-word challenge?
Most certainly. So the 200-word RPG challenge, just if it's not clear from the name itself, is a challenge that we do every year, where essentially people are encouraged to make an RPG. You can do whatever you want. The only requirement is you can only have 200 words to tell the whole story, which, as you can imagine, is a little bit challenging. But it's also a wonderful, easy entry point for a lot of people, because the concept and thought process that you're going to make a 200,000 word tome of knowledge that we all see up on the books. I mean, unless you're a prolific writer like Matt over there who just grinds out words like it's nothing, is quite a daunting task. 200 words. Anyone listening to this can do that in an afternoon. I mean, you can put it together. It's very accessible, and we've seen this in the numbers that grow and grow and grow. Just this year, we had 800 entries into this contest, and I think even better than that, based on our surveys, 25% of them, so 200 people, had never written a game before, had never even attempted it before. So this year alone, we had 200 people entering the design space, when probably if it wasn't for a contest like these, they never would have been in there. And these are the people that in 10, 20 years, these are the names that we're going to know. These are the names that are going to drive the industry. It's helping people get into the community and helping people get into the design community and make all of these wonderful games, sort of as we've talked about, that are going to be played on live streams over the years. So it's a wonderful contest. I encourage everyone to take part in it, because again, you can write it in an afternoon.
I have to say, that 200-word contest blew my mind. I remember reading all, because I judged last year. That was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And just going through and reading them, I felt like I was reading these treasures.
Yeah.
They were so heartfelt. Some of them you could tell they'd never written anything. It was just from their soul, and they were creative, and they spanned just all the different types of everything.
It's one of the great things that I see from it is, when you only have 200 words, it's really hard to write out, I'm going to say, a full traditional mechanical system. And not that there's anything wrong with those systems, but what it forces people to do is to create very unique and interesting ideas. I'll talk about one of the winners. It's called Dear Elizabeth, and I thought this game was absolutely brilliant. It's a two-player RPG where essentially the two players sit in different rooms and write letters to each other simultaneously, and then pass them across. And then once they pass them across, there's mechanics that get triggered. But it does this wonderful space of using this asymmetrical distribution of information, and that you are making decisions before you get the information you need to do it. And to do that in 200 words, I almost think that game existed because they were required to do it in 200 words, which is just so interesting and unique. And to see those kind of design concepts pop up is just absolutely fantastic.
It's really beautiful. I mean, just like the amount of diversity and ideas that comes out of that kind of limitation, that's healthy. That's what the hobby should be going towards.
Absolutely.
It's things like that.
I actually have a question, since you guys sort of look at games from an academic perspective, and not only do we have the 200-word contest, but there are things like Game Chef and Golden Cobra. Has the contest scene, do you feel like it's influenced or helped innovate the field in a measurable way?
As a co-founder of the Golden Cobra contest,
I guess that was a softball.
which inspired the 200-word RPG contest, because they basically, I think David, he could correct me, but I feel like he saw what we were doing for freeform LARPs, and he's like, yeah, but tabletop RPGs. I'm like, okay. So Golden Cobra contest has been around since 2014, and it is, again, a low barrier to entry for people to write their own freeform LARPs. And the idea was to solve the Gen Con problem. Mm-hmm. The Gen Con problem.
Wait a minute, what?
Oh, yes. We run games on demand. Random people show up, and then we say, here, have a game. Now, imagine, here, have a LARP. Okay, what am I doing? A lot of LARPs are designed with very fixed player counts. They're designed to be held in specific, intimate spaces, and they are supposed to last 4 hours or even 6 hours or a whole weekend. We looked at that back catalog in 2014 and said, we can't run a 5-person game of a 12-person game like the Tribunal. We can't. There's another game that was on the schedule that required exactly 4 people, and we could only get 3. So what we designed the contest was around flexible player count, low barrier to entry, could be played anywhere, and was 2 hours maximum in length. And just those constraints just opened everything up. So I also thought that the 200-word contest is doing the same thing. As a scholar switching around, there is a whole wealth of games that are not being played from those. We realized in the first year of the Golden Cobra contest, we were the kingmakers. We were, by putting the honorable mention and the awards on the 55-some entries, we were saying these are the ones you should play, and the others may or may not get played. I would like for us to play the 800 entries from this year, and I want to figure out how that's capable of being done, and for it to be done with enough rigor so we can know what to learn from it. You know, if you look at the filmmakers of the 1960s or even in the early 50s when that movement was developing in France with the Cahiers du Cinema, they're watching all these older films and saying, well, this film was crap, but it had this great tracking shots like 30 minutes in. And that's of course Godard, Truffaut, all these people we know now. And so I'm thinking the 200-word contest has the same potential. There are all of these design possibilities lurking in the middle there. Golden Cobra too, all these gems. And we as judges didn't get to read. We just read through 70 games. What do you think? We played any of them? No. And so I would like for actual play to intervene and just start playing the back catalog, so that then we can get a sense of what the innovations are and what are the hidden gems that didn't get awards.
There's someone out there listening right now who's like, I will do that. I will play, I will play all the games.
Good luck. It's a neat thing to think about. But a lot of these games, I think, were probably never played. They were probably never played by the people who wrote them, right? I mean, they're really done as an exercise in writing as opposed to, and in design, as opposed to an exercise in play.
I mean, I wrote Maya Deren Discotheque for the first 200-word RPG contest. That was based on the films of Maya Deren from the 1940s, and you know, you're supposed to like form a weird disco line and lick the air, and you know, and then I was shocked that multiple groups decided to play it, right? So I think, you know, more it's surprise and awe that people decide to play your 200-word RPG game rather than expectation.
Yeah, and actually, I get my own. Again, the first year that they did that, the contest, I entered with a game called The Terrible RPG. Don't ever name your game.
Oh, I remember that.
It's a poor choice, but it's a pun because I don't like puns, but someone in my house does, and I bow to her whim. So the concept of the game, and actually it's gotten play on One Shot and a couple other places, is you have a character sheet essentially where you write any skills that you want, and then you literally rip your character sheet apart to use those skills. So it's been a fun, interesting concept that actually has gotten out there and gotten to play. But just to really second what Evan kind of said there, you know, I know within us internally within the 200-word RPG contest, that's one of the things we're really looking to do, because I think most people on the stage are I'm going to say game designers are close enough to qualify, and a lot of people listening and understand the concept of you don't truly understand the game until you play it, even at 200 words. You know, there's aspects of it that you can understand and aspects of it that you probably aren't going to realize for anyone until you actually play the game, and that needs to be a core component of it. Of course, the logistical challenge is how do you play 800 games in a contest in any sort of time, and that's the magic bullet that we're still trying to find at this point. But I do very much agree with that. Seeing those games in play in some aspect would go a long way to seeing what sort of things that they offer.
I'm going to pose a radical question. Are games meant to be played? Maybe they're writing, right? Like,
Actually, as a guy who has published a lot of games, worked on a lot of games, they're meant to be both. I mean, games also have to be an entertaining read as well as being entertaining to play, right? And if they're not entertaining to read, people are never going to get to the playing part of it, right? But it's kind of amazing that you know, I've written a lot of games over the years, and the idea that you could have thousands of people out there. Intellectually, you know that there are thousands of people playing these games, but you know, you never see this, right? You never actually watch people play, and to see other people playing things that you've written or worked on is kind of stunning, right? One of the problems with teaching people how to play games at a show even like Gen Con, where you're trying to demonstrate your game and get people to play, is that you can only really run like 4 to 6 people through at a time, right? As opposed to, like, one of the reasons I like doing panels a lot of the times is you can reach a lot more people. You know, there's not a ton of people in the audience here because it's too early, but we have people watching us. So I like to do panels where I can talk to 100 people at a time, as opposed to just running 4 people through a game. But with actual play now. We can actually show people how to do this. It's really kind of stunning how that's going to feed back, like Jim was talking about earlier, in the actual design as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Keith Baker had this thing called Have Dice Will Travel. And I think he hit like 86 games, same module, but ran it through 86 times. And what was magical about that is that everyone was different. Same module, but every single game was different. And I think you see that idea a lot in actual play where you have all these people, all these dungeon masters, all these players doing the same things, but in completely different ways with their own ideas. And that's one of the things that we try to share at Dungeons and Dragons is, here is the book. This is a guideline. Make it your own. You know, and I get a lot of emails saying, oh, well, what's this rule? Does this rule this? Can I do this? Can I have this pet? Does this make sense? I'm like, I don't know, ask your dungeon master. You know, and it's, we're lucky now to be able to see that, because being able to watch the different game masters and the different ways to play and the different, you know, having audience participation in that, now it influences you and it makes you a better player and a better dungeon master, being able to see both sides. Right? Now, as a dungeon master, I have my table, and I know how to affect them. But then watching someone else's table and watching how they react, I'm like, oh, maybe my players might be thinking of that, but not saying it. And then I can go in and kind of, you know, rework the way I think about something.
Yeah, no, it's just kind of stunning how, you know, I've run, like I have this one adventure I run for a game, Shotguns and Sorcery, which is a role-playing game. It's coming out based on my books later this year. And I've run it probably 20 different times, and every damn time it's different, right? Because it's a different group of people. And even if you have the same dungeon master, game master, or whatever, it's always going to be different because you're riffing off the people that are in the room with you, as opposed to, you know, one of the problems is that when people are learning how to play games is they always go, am I doing it right? Right? They're always confused and they're afraid. And that's one of the reasons I think it's hard to get people to try things like role-playing games or more complicated games, because they're afraid of doing it wrong, right? But I think one of the, again, doing actual play in 200-word RPGs, things like that, show people that it's easy to get into and that there's really no way to do it wrong as long as you're having fun.
Yeah. It's really just making it more accessible, right? Like that's the common theme that we're talking about here, whether it's actual play, showing examples of how it can be done, but it doesn't have to be done this way, right? And there are so many people now who were maybe had never played a game before, but then they watched you guys, right, myself included, and got more interested in it, right? And that's the same thing with the 200-word RPG, right? Trying to make it just a little soundbite of a game to say, you can do this. It's not that hard. If you want to do it, give it a try. It's only 200 words. You can
That's
do it in an
literally
afternoon.
our core mission statement at One Shot is to make games more accessible and inclusive.
Yeah.
And that actual play is just the scalpel that we use to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, like, what we've been trying to do with Analog Game Studies is, yes, we are a scholarly journal, but a lot of our articles are very accessible. Like, we try to rip out all the academic jargon and say, hey, let's just talk about a game. Like, and if you read through our back catalog, there's so many articles that disagree with each other because it's about a conversation, right? And we publish it anyways because we say, hey, you have a cool thing to say, let's publish it.
We literally had a proposal last night that contradicts about 5 years worth of role-playing theory, and we were just like, yes, do
Publish
it.
it.
Yep, send
We'll
us the
do it.
article, we'll keep it going.
Well, that's really powerful, because right now we have this issue of everyone debating, but they don't even know what debating actually is. It's having the conversation, hearing each other, and maybe at the end you agree to disagree, but not inflicting your will on other people. And the great thing about our community is that the conversation is so fluid. There are some trolls out there, but generally it's phenomenal how cooperative they are in conversation, even in chat.
The role-playing community has always been the space of people from radically different political views coming together to do something they love. And it's kind of cool that there's a potential there to actually have conversations about the world and games and find ways to negotiate those disagreeing perspectives that are new and, push us as a world, as a people forward towards understanding each other a little better.
Yeah, and games is something that is sort of driven by empathy in the first place. It makes sense that those sorts of conversations are happening out of this.
Fantastic. Oh my God, we had a lull in the conversation. Actually, I wanted to point out we have two people here I want to bring up at some point. We have Peter Atkinson and Adrian Swartout, who are from Gen Con. And you guys want to come up and chat for a little bit too?
Yeah, I'll swap out.
Yeah.
You don't have to if it's too early, but we'd love to have you up here and talk about.
Yeah, it's not a problem.
It's cooperative.
Yeah, we're all just messing around here. We'll rotate through. We can have some fun. If I could turn the camera on you, I would. But
I have 5 minutes before I need more coffee.
there we go. Well, we'll bring you up in a few minutes. Then. Does that sound good? Okay, good. I just want to make sure you guys knew I could see you up there, me on the bright lights, whatever. Well, there we go. Very cool. No, be interesting. Shit, we're in trouble. Oh man, I just blew it. My wife said don't start. There you go.
I have a question. I am curious
Yeah.
how everyone found out about the award.
About the Diana Jones Award? You mean like how did you find out about the nomination or find
Yeah.
out about it originally? That's a good question. Well, I think it was probably James Wallace actually contacted everybody. Is that how you guys found out? No.
Not at all.
Eventually,
well, we screwed that
eventually,
up.
but no.
It sounds like you have a story to tell, Shelley.
How did you find out, Shelley?
I was sitting on the couch with my husband, who was on his laptop on Reddit, and he looked over at me and said, "Hey, babe, did you know the journal that you edited got nominated for this award?" And my reaction was, "No, wait, is that real? Let me Google it. Oh, wait, it is real."
And then I saw that on Facebook, and I was like, oh, whoa.
And then you found out completely differently.
No, I was in charge of Origins Games on Demand, and I finally got the table all set up and was admiring our handiwork. And then Mark Diaz-Truman from Magpie Games walks in and says, "Congratulations, man." And I was like, "Well, we haven't started yet. I mean, I just set up the tables. We're not over the event." He's like, "No, for you got nominated for a Diana Jones Award." I'm like, "You who?" and I had to again Google it to make sure that was real. So it was an absolute honor to be nominated, and it made my evening, even though the tables were set up and ready to go.
It was an absolute, honor and amazing thing. And just full disclosure, we did get the email, but it
Yes,
went
we
to,
did.
it went
Yes.
to the review email we have for the journal, which I'm in charge of going through, and that's work. And so so I'm not always in it. So I'm like, oh, happy thing in work. So the happy things get to us.
Yes.
That's hilarious. I mean, to me, it's really kind of funny that anybody cares about the Diana Jones Award because, give you a little history about the award. It actually was originally a pub tribute trophy, right? It was actually created by the guys from TSR UK. When they shut down TSR UK back in the 80s, some of the employees took a copy of the Indiana Jones role-playing game and burnt it, right? And then they took the bit of the logo that was left, which is Diana Jones. Right. I have friends who argue with me about it should be the Deanna Jones Award because it's Indiana, but it's the Diana Jones Award. And they even have the little Nazi cards that have a TM on them, right? If you've ever heard the legend about how Lucasfilm actually trademarked Nazi, which is the reason that it actually is Nazi TM throughout the role-playing game. Believe it or not, this was required. Lucasfilm's licensing department required TSR to put a trademark next to Nazi.
So Lucasfilm is who we should be talking to. Right
Exactly. But I had a lot of friends at TSR at the time and got a lot of flack over that, as you might imagine.
Right.
But then they took it and encased it in a plexiglass pyramid and put it on a wood a base for some reason. And this became a trivia trophy for 10 years. And then James Wallace, who's a good friend of mine, is a great game designer, did The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, all sorts of other fantastic games. Las Vegas is the latest one. He says, well, I have a trophy. Maybe we should make an award out of this, right? And he's just got together a group of people on a mailing list and said, hey, guys, what do you think was the most excellent thing in gaming this year? And we're like, dude, I don't know. And we came up with, first year was actually Peter Atkinson over there, who won the award the first time through, and that was 17 years ago now. And we started out, I was having a birthday party that year, and James said, can I give out the award at your party? And we had Peter stand up in a chair with James and give him the award there in a bar, essentially, and that's how it started out. So, now we've done this 18 times, and people actually are like, wow, that's kind of a cool award. And we have people saying, can I put your logo on our game and such? And I'm just kind of astonished, because it's still just a group of people who are sitting around on a mailing list saying, I don't know, what do you think was cool, right?
It's actually more amazing than that. Last night, there were industry professionals there, and it was amazing to meet all these people that I've seen on the internet. So it's more than just an award. It's another way for all of us to like get to know each other, and they're all vouched by you, and you're fantastic. So it was a really nice way to start off Gen Con. So
Yeah.
thank you for throwing
Thank
this.
you. It's
Yeah.
wild to
Thank
hear
you.
how casual you were about that.
One of the cool things about the party, and then people say, "Why do you work the door?" I actually greet everybody at the door, shake their hand, give them a drink ticket, and all that kind of stuff. And the reason I do that is because it's one of my few chances to actually see everybody at the show. The show has gotten so many. There's like 70,000 people who show up nowadays, and probably 10% of them I know as friends. Right? As this is my 37th Gen Con. And to be able to have an event where I can say, hey, good to see you. Maybe I've just met you on the internet. Maybe I've never seen you before in my life. But to meet you, talk to you, and just even have a few seconds with you before we go into the crazy hubbub this is all going to be, that's kind of a magical moment for me. I love doing that, just to be able to engage with people like that and to say hi. And just once a year to say, yeah, I see you, and thank you for coming.
One of the things that made it tremendously meaningful to me is the Diana Jones Awards, and the ceremony specifically, has factored heavily into like my entry into the professional space around games. And when people are trying to get into the industry, to welcome them in, if they're at Gen Con, I tell them to go to the Diana Jones because it's where I've met, people who were just names on the spines of books before, right? And it's where I made, most of my gaming friends. And these days, it's where I go to, like, if I'm looking for new games and new ideas that we want to highlight on our shows, the Diana Jones is an important place that I do that. And so hearing that the Diana Jones Awards, like, especially like addressed so casually, like, to me, it is one of the most important awards in gaming because it does specifically focus on things like, okay, what's changing things? What do we really admire? It's celebrating all of these things that we love and we also feel are important in some way. So I think it's a really cool tradition, and I think it's evolved into something much larger than it started out as, for sure.
The funny part is you think of it as a tradition now, right? For us, it's like that. This is a group of guys you hung out with in high school, and we're just going to get together with everybody every year. And eventually it becomes a tradition because you've been doing it for year after year, right? But still, you never lose the fact that the point is that you're there to get together with friends. And the friends and the group of people that you're with will morph over the years. It's going to be different. Some people will come in, some people will wash out. I saw a guy last night I hadn't seen in 20 years. I used to be a booth monkey at the Iron Crown Enterprises booth. And he was the production manager for Iron Crown, and he sat there and we talked for about 5 or 10 minutes, and he chatted with my wife. It's just neat to be able to catch up with people like that and have them come in and out of your life, even for that little bit of time, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, one of the things about the party is I try to be very inclusive. There's not a whole lot of gatekeeping going on there. Honestly, if you show up with a badge and say, I'm here for the award, I usually say, come on in, it's fun, right? I think I turned away one guy who just was obviously drunk and looking for a free drink. He's like, you got beer? And I'm like, no.
No beer. One of the cool things.
Oh wait, that was me, was it?
The other cool thing about this is, did I lose it? Did I lose my thought?
I'll give you a
We can
second.
find it.
I was going to say, there's a really cool thing about it where the tradition is actually being undermined also, right? Like there's this history of like Nazism and like terrible role-playing games. and TSR UK being a sort of failed enterprise, right? And so it's getting rid of all the bad stuff and making something great and new out of that. And I think that's part of its story and part of its history.
So I did remember.
Excellent.
Basically, you've got the internet and you have a lot of people who are in front of the camera all the time. What people don't know is that we are also behind the camera. And there's all these people who are behind games. And last night was amazing. And this is what, like, my favorite part of conventions is going to the private parties where all the people behind the scenes get together. Because you have to have a reverence for the amount of work that goes into the games that people are playing publicly. It's hard. It's very vulnerable when you're putting yourself out there and you snort and someone makes a gif of you just snorting over and over and you're just like, oh, geez. But they don't realize all the hard work. And then maybe the game is an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, but you got there 2 hours ahead of time. You clean up an hour afterwards. You bought all the equipment. You tested the equipment. And it fails, and everyone's smiling at the table while everything's on fire in the background. There's all these things that go on, all the modules, all the time spent making 1 3-hour adventure. just researching, knowing your players so that you go and you find the right story for them and the right monsters and sitting there judging and being very aware. There's all these things that go into games that people don't realize. When you watch something, you're entertained. But there's literally just hours of experience that have gotten to there. With Maze Arcana, we had Orphan Echo, and that was our very first show. The very first one was done with 5 Logitechs. My computer burst into flames. We had an ice pack on it, and it was a nightmare. But it's beautiful that in the last 2 years we've evolved. We've got these beautiful Blackmagic Ursas, and it's gorgeous lighting, and it's like you just have to stop and think. People go back and like, this was really crappy. I'm like, I know, I agree with you, it was crappy. But you got to be there through my experience. You got to be there through all of our experiences, and we've evolved together, and we know how to communicate with you better and with each other better, and evolving together, and watching each other's shows, and getting influenced by the way one of your shows has like the table, and it's like, oh man, that table's so cool, and then you go back and you're like, okay, how can I make my table like that?
How can we steal that?
Not stealing. No, it's like that. It just is.
Right?
Yeah.
You rip
Okay.
off each other.
I
all the
will
time.
say, when I
Riff.
went to the Geek and
I like
Sundry
riff.
studio, I wanted to steal that table.
Yeah. I do feel like Matt Mercer made like the best gaming table.
Yes.
Yeah, he did.
You'll need a bag of holding to steal that table.
Well, you come to the right show at least. Come on.
More like a
think that's my
large
next
truck
option.
of holding because it's heavy.
Yeah, it's
a little more obvious.
It looks polished when you're at the end of all these things, right? Well, things evolve, you get better as you go, and eventually it looks polished and looks like you've been doing this for years because you have been doing it for years. But when you're starting out, it's just like a baling wire and scotch tape and everything else, just holding things together to try to make something look professional. I mean, I did a game called Deadlands many years ago with Pinnacle Entertainment Group, which I was a co-founder of, and we literally we debuted at Gen Con in 1996, and I was literally running out to the loading dock to get boxes of games to pick up off the truck to have them when the doors opened at 10 o'clock. I mean, the guys were like six trucks back, and we had to go knock on the door and say, please, 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 let me get in your truck. And the people who show up at our booth don't know, right? It's the guys who are there who are actually helping me schlep all the boxes and everything else. Fantastic fun, right? It's good to see those kind of people and just hang out with them and realize all the hard work that goes into it. I mean, there are a lot of people even here in this room that are doing a lot of work. They're not stepping in front of this camera, and we owe them a lot of thanks just for allowing the rest of us to get up here and say something. It's very cool.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I just love about the spirit of the Diana Jones Awards is, you can come as a first-time game designer or someone who is considering entering the design space, and, there's Matt at the door. It's like, this is a private party, and you're like, yeah, for the Diana Jones, and Matt welcomes you in. You're like, help, and I found that with all the folks that I met at the awards. The first time I went to the Diana Jones, I would talk to a game design hero, and I was like, I want to let you get back to talking to your friends, but I'm so happy to meet you, and I'm glad to be here. And the person I was talking to was Ken Hite, and he said, everyone here is my friend. You're my friend. And like, that changed, like, my perspective on design and like my life, and it arced to here.
But everybody is Ken Height's friend. Like, he
for
has
sure
dark
true.
magic behind him. You know how
Very
much
true.
Cthulhu he's engaged with? Yes, you're his friend for both good and bad reasons.
But it's a cool combination of people who want to work together. You know that you have your project, you're going to work on another project. It's like, oh, your brain is awesome. Let's share brain power. And that I just watched that last night. Everyone was in their groups, and then they split off and welcomed another person. It's nice to be a part of a group that is welcoming.
No, it's one of the neat things about the gaming industry in general, I think, is that the line between fan and professional is so blurry as it to not almost be there at all, right? All of us are fans at a certain point, and if we're lucky and we have enough passion, we get to do something professional as well. But I don't think anybody should look down on a fan. We're all the same thing, right? We're all starting at the same place, and it's that passion that really we bring to the projects. That's what helps us be professionals. So just to be able to have people walk in, like last night you're talking about, we have, there are are guys I've known in the industry who've been there for 30 or 40 years. You got legends walking around like, Peter and Adrian and everybody else. And then people who have never been to the show before, and they're just showing up as a +1 with a friend of theirs and don't really have any clue, but this looks really cool, And we're all having beers and whatever else and having fun, and that's the whole point. It's like a very large live-action role-playing game.
The game is be a creator around other creators.
No, one of the things I love about Gen Con in general, and the Diana Jones Award party too, is I get so excited to see people. I mean, at the end of the show, I'm going to go home and I'm just going to be inspired, right, from having met so many incredibly creative, professional, wonderful, energetic people. And again, riffing off that and saying, okay, this is cool. That guy, that girl was doing such a cool thing out there. I got to do something too. This is going to be fantastic, right? And it'll get me Jones for the entire year.
No pun intended.
I think this is a good time to tap out because this whole lack of coffee. My coffee died. I was really upset. I only got a couple sips. So I should go get coffee. Maybe it's a good time to swap out.
Would you like to come up, Peter and Adrian? There we go.
Woohoo! Thank you so much for
Yes, thank you.
inviting all of us. Ivan has the trophy.
Yeah, Ivan Van Norman stole the trophy last night. No.
But he has a really fun idea.
Oh, yeah?
And it's not, we haven't, I don't know if I should say it, but it has something
No,
to
do it.
do.
You got
say
It's too late.
Okay. So basically, it's to have a camera on it all year. And I'll let him further that conversation and just put that in your head. That way we all can share it all the time. You're like,
That's
I
very
wonder,
fitting.
I wonder how it's doing. Boop. And it's just like,
The Diana Jones Award live cam. It's just.
I think you should
Maybe we
at
can
least
give it
play
a
one
cat.
session with the award, so that
yeah,
it's
that'd be
fitting for
nice.
actual play.
Yeah. But it would be fun to just have like it and a cat in a room and just have like
Oh, it's like an eagle nest cam, right? That kind of an idea.
with an eagle.
Yeah,
This
exactly.
is
It'd be
great.
even
I
better.
like it.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm swapping out.
All right.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, Satine. Good ladies. Thank you, Satine. All right, man. Thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it. You can take off too. Thank you. Peter, do you want to come up and join us? All right. Well, let's have Adrian introduce herself.
I'm Adrian. Oh, that's loud.
Yeah.
I am Adrian Sportout, and I am one of the owners of Gen Con. And up until last year, I was the CEO and ran the show for about 10 years. But I am now a woman of leisure and am retired. So, interestingly enough, this is my first time at the show. As an owner, but I didn't plan anything this year, so I'm walking around and I'm like, they did what?
Wait a minute.
But then I have to remind myself that not my monkeys, not my zoo, and it's all fine, and I'm just here to kind of hang out. So it's my first Gen Con, getting to do Gen Con stuff.
Well, welcome to the group.
Thank you.
And Peter, we want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Peter Atkinson. I am Adrian's business partner. We are two of the owners of Gen Con, and also we're really close friends. It's great to have her
BFFs.
here, BFFs. And I don't know, I do other things.
Peter, for instance, founded Wizards of the Coast, which published Magic the Gathering, bought Dungeons and Dragons, does all sorts of wonderful other things.
Thank you.
A couple things.
And
yeah.
I started a film company
Yeah,
a couple years
exactly.
ago
That's true,
called
Chaldea.
Chaldea.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're hoping to launch at around Gen Con-ish in 2020. So we'll
fantastic.
see if that works.
I've been watching
So-
some of the filming as you've been doing stuff in
Oh,
productions.
it's a lot of fun.
Looks like it's going to be fantastic.
Fabulous.
I'm excited. Cool. So last year, here we have actually the first ever Diana Jones Award winner, and we have last year's Diana Jones Award winner because Adrian accepted for Gen Con last year, and along with representatives from this year's Diana Jones. So it's kind of a lot of history here at the table.
It's a star-studded panel.
It's funny when you mentioned about having the whole range of how long people have been here and stuff, and the old timers. You said something like old timers, and you pointed at me. It's funny. It's like I had to do deer in the headlights for a moment because I've been coming since 1992. But it's weird, like I don't know, you'll experience this, I don't know if you had the same story, but like there's the point you come into the industry and there's this point, and you think of everybody who was in the industry already, as your seniors, right? Like these are the people who are the truly great people of the industry, and I'm just kind of a newcomer, you know? And I still have a bit of that attitude, you know, when I see Sandy Peterson, you know, or a Greg Stafford, you know, or a Steve Jackson at an industry event, I'm like, can I go get you a coffee, sir? Is there anything, you know? You know, I still want to go up and tell them how much their work inspired me and all that
Showing
stuff.
the proper deference. That's good. You know.
It's from the heart, man. It's from the heart.
I don't know if you guys know Troy Denning, who used to work for TSR way back in the day.
Oh, yeah, Troy.
Writes Star
Yeah.
Wars novels and Halo novels now. And Troy kind of mentored me into the industry when I was a kid, like when I was like 15, 16 years old, because I was growing up in southern Wisconsin. And I saw him at Comic-Con a couple years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. He goes, "How old are you now?" And I'm like, I think I was 45 at the time. He goes, "God, I still think about you as if you were 16. Right? Like, Troy, I have 5
That's because
children.
you still act like you're 16.
Well, there is that, yeah. My wife says the same thing. That's maybe not coincidental. So there you go. Well, I think it helps be young at heart when you're in an industry like this. I think it helps keep you young at heart because you're making a living at it, sure, but you're doing it for fun. I mean, if it wasn't fun, I'd be off doing something else, right? Same for everybody here, I would hope.
That's true. Hey, can I comment about, you talked about the nature, there was a little conversation about the nature of the Diana Jones Awards, and one thing that I think is really special about it is that it's so vague.
Exactly.
You're telling me the actual play movement's not a very
Yeah.
specific award? What are you talking about?
You know, it's like, you know, when your Irish charity auctions won the Diana Jones Awards.
Well, it's beautiful because then it always upends expectations, right? So you have the mysterious cabal on one hand. So who gave this award and to what? And that allows you infinite flexibility as this industry evolves. So as when we started the Golden Cobra contest in 2014. Like that was just 1 year of production, and then people started designing games like they were in 2014. We're like, no, the contest has changed. We put in new rules. I'm like, oh, that's because we've now become a thing. But Diana Jones Award is just an amorphous blob of awarding that actually is quite flexible to adapt to anything gaming needs.
But it's allowed us to go from an award for something like a great groundbreaking RPG like Sorcerer, or to Irish charity auctions, to actual play, and then come back and and then touch on other classics in different categories. And it's one of the challenges, of course, is like, how do you weigh these options against each other, right?
It's apples and oranges, literally.
Yeah, that's I think the most common complaint I hear, but that's also a key to what I think has been successful for Diana Jones.
Yeah, it's amorphous by design, right? I mean, the whole point is not to actually define it too much. Originally, when we started out, we had ways for people to send us games to apply to, say, hey, this is my thing. Nowadays, we don't even accept that. We're just like, we're all in the industry, the people on the list, and we will figure it out. We don't need you to tell us what to think is cool, because we're out there and we're breathing this, we're eating this, and doing this stuff every day. So I think it's neat that we were able to do it. And again, keeping it amorphous means we get to define it ourselves every time and say, well, the only criteria is what did we think was excellent that year, right? And it doesn't have to, to be at least tangentially related to tabletop gaming, right? But that allows us to do anything we want to with it, and we can change things on the fly, and we're responsible to nobody, right? Which is the best part of it.
And there's really no rules because the voting takes care of it, right? It's like, okay, well, should we allow a video game to be a Diana Jones Award? Well, we don't have to have a rule against it, but boy, that's going to be tough for it to get voted in.
If enough people on the committee said yes, then sure.
Yeah,
but
just rely on the voting process. Don't worry about it.
You're trusting the people that you're hanging out with, essentially. You're trusting the group mind to be able to rate that. And it's very much like a game where you're playing it in the spirit of the game. We all understand what the spirit of the game is. There are literally, I don't think, nobody's ever written down any rules for the Diana Jones Award. I mean, it's done in email, so of course it's all written in that sense. But there's not like a document that says this is how we do things and this is how it's always going to be done and these are the people, whatever. James came up with it. I host the party. We have a lot of people on the list, and we just have fun with it, right? And I think it shows in the award at the end of the year is that we're just whoever wanted to be the most engaged, most passionate about it, who wants to argue their point the best. And if people respond to that in the voting, they respond. If they don't, they don't, right? I mean, some people might think that, this one game was fantastic, but if not enough other people care about it, it doesn't matter. Right. And enough people this year for actual play. Like last year, Christ, we're all like, yeah, I think Gen Con won. That's okay. We're going to figure this out. It's Gen Con 50. It's going up against, we don't care what.
I wasn't certain. Because we were up against some really good stuff.
Yeah,
you
yeah, it's
know?
true.
I mean, you look at those things, and yeah, I mean, Gen Con's pretty cool, and it was Gen Con 50 and all of that. But there were some contenders on that list.
Oh, yeah, I don't want to denigrate the contenders because they were a lot of fantastic things. But on the other hand, just about everybody was like, yeah, what else are you going to vote for? It's Gen Con. It's the 50th Gen Con, right? And also, you're on your way out, and you've done such a great job over the last 10 years, and we're like, we want to recognize that, right? And it was a perfect time to just step back. And, Peter won, 16, 17 years before that. But it was a perfect time to step back and say, okay, this is a year to recognize how awesome Gen Con is and the influence it's had upon not just the industry, but everybody in it as well, right? All the different people. And what a wonderful event this is. I thought that was a fantastic way to do it.
Right. I mean, it's, I think, I'm thinking back to last year, and Gen Con and the industry have always had a really torrid love affair, right? I mean, it just is. We have been synonymous with each other for so long. And Gen Con really is this melting pot of attendees and game designers and storytellers and writers and wannabe writers and costumers and dreamers. And the list goes on and on and on. And we come together once a year for the last 50 years to come and share these things with each other and do these things. And it's just this profound, powerful sense of community that, I mean, look at me, it gets me every single time, because you feel it, to have this many people setting up a city and coming together and just doing what brings them joy.
I have to know, now that you are free, what are you looking forward to enjoying most? Like you've run this place, and now you do get to experience Gen Con things, like you were saying. I gotta know, what does somebody who hasn't had that go for?
I don't even know where to start. I've never played a game at Gen Con.
Wow.
There's never been time for that. So there's two things that I know that I want to do. I want to paint a mini, because I hear that's really, really cool. And I also want to watch the costume contest from start to finish, because that has never happened. And I do want to play a game, but I don't even know what.
They have a few
dice
of them
in my
here.
bag.
Yeah, one or
We could
two.
Probably.
How much time we got?
Yeah. Are we going to show off actual plays, or are we going to show off actual plays?
Yeah, let's do it.
I've got 800 games that need to be play tested
That's
from
right.
this year's contest. So
Well,
if you want to
as
get
a woman
started,
of leisure, I can get right on that.
Now that is a great title for a 200-word game, Woman of Leisure.
Woman of
Woman of
Leisure, that would do
Leisure.
well.
I don't
That
think
would
you
do
need
well.
anything more than that, actually.
Well,
You get
anything
the-
more than that would be work, and I don't do that.
There we go. The three-word RPG.
It starts with, you are Adrienne Swarthout. You have just, you are a woman of leisure. You have just moved to Portugal.
Go.
You know, it's funny listening to you all talk, and you mentioned, of course, painting a miniature, and it's going to lead to a question to the more I'm going to say more tenured people on the panel here. My first Gen Con was 5 or 6 years ago at this point, and it was really an interesting experience, because I'd been in tabletop, just with the local group forever, and I live right over in Cincinnati, so I'm an hour and a half from Gen Con, an hour and a half from Origins, and just forever had not gone to a convention, because I was like, it just sounds so big. And then I went here, and it was, but in all of the good ways. And I spent probably my first day and a half at Gen Con just wandering around, because I realized, it's not just the convention center, it's all the hotels and all this, and just seeing all the things. And you would walk into a room, and it would be like, there are 60 people just in perfectly silence painting miniatures, and I assume having the greatest time of their life right now. And then and if someone has the answer to this, whatever gnome game that I see them playing in the hallway, I don't know if you all have seen that, where they're dressed up like gnomes. I saw it, and I was fascinated. I must have watched it for an hour. I was like, these people are having the most wonderful time of their lives, and that can only happen here. So that's my long-winded way of getting to. That was my experience 5, 6 years ago, and obviously Gen Con has only continued to grow bigger and bigger. What was the experience like for you all prior to this? When it was early stages, was it always this big crazy of an event? What was it like back in the day?
Yeah, I mean, it's all relative. So even though Gen Con is much, much bigger than it was, my first was in 1992, and I was there as an exhibitor. I was poor, I was from the West Coast, so I never had access. I always dreamed of going to Gen Con. Like I would subscribe to, back in the day, Dragon Magazine, and it would publish the event list in the magazine, and you would fill out what you wanted to do at the show, and you would send it in, and hope that you got to play in the event. All done by mail, okay? Yeah, oh, yeah. And I knew I couldn't go, but I would fill out the form. It was like a...
And if you couldn't do that, it was cave paintings?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I would fill out the form,
The original
address and
actual
everything
play.
like that, and then just not actually mail it because I knew it wouldn't be there. So finally arriving at Gen Con, well, there was excitement of being an exhibitor there, but walking into the exhibit hall, which was much, much smaller than it is now, but it was so much bigger than anywhere else, that was a big part of it. And then I also remember, it was a little thing, but I also remember walking towards registration, and there was a choir, a medieval, like a Ren Fair choir of about 8 guys. I think Keith Strom was in on that, and a couple other people, I'm sure we know, singing. And I just thought, oh, they were all dressed up in the same sort of outfit. And it was like, for some reason, like, wow, that's really cool. I don't know, the things that impress you, that.
And you're like, I left my lute at home. What-
I was like, wow, live music. It just set the mood.
This is probably this is my 5th Gen Con, and I remember I was coming from going to Comic-Con so many years, and being, Comic-Con is great in its own way, but it's also not in many other ways. And I remember I was like, Gen Con, okay, it's kind of like Comic-Con, okay, I got it. And I came here and I was completely blown away because it was fine-tuned to what I wanted as, as a tabletop geek specifically, but also just what I wanted in a convention. And I remember coming back and going to like my friends who were going to Comic-Con, and I was all like, well, do you have tickets to panels that you want to see, or do you have to wait in line? And they're like, we have to wait in line. And I was like, oh, I have tickets to all the panels that I want to see. I could just go in. It's all handled. I mean, we did it all electronically. It's fine. But I remember telling my friends, some of them were here, and going, you guys have to go to Gen Con next year because it's amazing. And everyone was like, yeah, okay, we'll go to Gen Con. And then everyone has come to Gen Con, and they're just like, this is the highlight of the year is Gen Con. So it's like, it's been an amazing kind of, like, thank you, all of you, for the show. But also, like, it just in terms of what we've done as actual plays, it's just tying it back into the Diana Jones. When I first came was basically the first year before my show had even like really premiered. And we had a panel. I had a panel in this room actually, and I think 3 people showed up. And I just kept telling people I was Will Wheaton. And as people were walking by, I would just be like, I'm Will Wheaton. Okay, you got it. And then, but as it grew, like every year, and then seeing more people from Twitch and from YouTube and podcasters and stuff showing up and just being more and more and having more and more of a presence, it's been an amazing kind of like transition, and I feel a growth kind of that industry, to see all that. So it's been really cool.
Yeah, I mean, Gen Con actually predates what a lot of us think about as tabletop role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, it's actually older than D&D. I mean, Gary started Gen Con before even TSR existed, right? So it's kind of amazing to have that kind of history. I first started coming to Gen Con when I was, I think I was 13 or 14 years old in southern Wisconsin, and my dad would just pick up me and my friends and drive us out to, it was in Parkside back in those days, UW Parkside, in 1985. And he would just drive us there, drop us off in the morning, and come pick us up at night. And I'm like, he's like, what kind of trouble can you get into? You're out there with a bunch of guys in the middle of the cornfields playing games, right? And it was a very different event then. The exhibit hall was actually in the gym of this, essentially community college. And every game had its own classroom, right? You could, in your own classroom, you could shut the door and play the game in the classroom. It was kind of wild, but I just fell in love with it. I've not missed for 37 years in a row. And some of the people I met at that show are guys I still know to this day, like Marty Stever and Will Niebling and Troy Denning, even from 37 years ago. Just it's part of this to me is more of a family reunion than anything else, right?
I grew up in Iowa, And so in the 90s, when I became part of the RPGA community, I don't know how many of you remember that, but yeah, it did. But you know, and that was all done by paper as well. The fellows that did RPGA with us, how would I describe it? Geared up for Gen Con like gearing up for a war. Because it was in Milwaukee at the time, and they were like, there's no food in Milwaukee, so we're bringing the RV, we're bringing the coolers. And I, to be honest, it was a very unattractive portrait, but it was also obviously worth it for them. And so there was this kind of fanaticism about the annual road trip to Gen Con that was both, you know, you get out your fatigues and gear up for like the hostile Milwaukee climate. And then on the other hand, like obviously you're gonna go, right? Aren't you gonna go? I'm like, I'm 14. I don't think so.
Yeah. It's like, hey, we're gonna go to Gen Con, and it's gonna be filled with hot, sweaty gamers. It's gonna stink really bad. The food's gonna be too expensive. It's gonna suck. And but there's only 14 of us in the hotel room this year, and it's amazing how many of your friends say, "Yeah, that sounds great. I'm in."
14, awesome. God, I remember, you having to like tiptoe through rooms, you know, put your
two
feet
down
between
from last
bodies
year.
as you go through. Exactly. People sleep in the goddamn bathtub. You know, it's whatever you had to do to pull it off.
That wasn't the first time you woke up in a bathtub,
no,
man.
I think you've woken up in the bathtub in my room.
We're at that point of the panel. All right.
It looks like we got new folks arriving. I have to step away.
I have a panel.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for, you know, obviously conducting the Diana Jones Awards, talking to us, running Gen Con. It seriously, it means so much as an actual player to be recognized by the community that we care so much about. So thank you guys sincerely from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you guys again. Thank you for showing up.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it.
And thank everybody watching.
All right.
Hey, One Shot
We
RPG.
have Rudy Ruttenberg here just joined us.
What's up?
So
I
Rudy,
like the balance on the table just continuously
yes,
shifting.
Exactly. So Rudy, why don't you introduce yourself to people who are watching?
Hi, everybody. I'm assuming I'm on this one.
It's
so
both of them, so.
I'll just say hi. I am Rudy Ruttenberg, and I am the other half of Maze Arcana. If you were watching earlier, you got to see my partner and co-founder of Maze Arcana over there, Miss Satine Phoenix. And she was just as stoked to hop up on stage last night as I was. So thank you for having us.
Congratulations, by the way.
Oh, well, you know, congratulations to all of us, because really that kind of, that was mostly like a community style award, I think, last night, because really we're all benefiting by actual play, and we can see the huge boom in the gaming industry over the last like 4 years, basically, since streaming started to take off. Obviously, it's a very big party to why D&D is having the record-breaking year that it's having for its own records, which is huge. And I feel like every company is having that record-breaking year, and I think that's why we're so excited to return back to physical gaming, and especially after. It's really funny to me that it's coming from a website that is so indicative of video gaming. Right. So that's so wonderful that it just enhances all of it.
Yeah, you know, I don't know whatever we would call it, the geek wave, because the last I think we saw the inflection point for our business. I mean, as Gen Con, it's great for us, obviously, the upward trend in geekdom, because we're right in the middle of it, and we're kind of agnostic in terms of which types of games and which games. But I think it was around 2008 or something, around in that period, about 10 years ago, that we saw this inflection point. It was just like all of a sudden, Gen Con had been growing for years, not necessarily every single year, kind of a sawtooth function, but gently up and to the right. And then all of a sudden, it was the hockey stick, and
That was just me.
Exploded.
That's right. That's when Adrian came on, right? Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, that on my list of factors, you're at the top of that
No,
list.
you are
yes.
correct. Right about 2008, we just watched all of a sudden attendance skyrocket in terms of that hockey stick going up to the right, and that's attendance as well in gaming companies coming back, or you saw people being really successful on a scale that hadn't been seen in a long time in the industry. And I think that there's elements.
Actual play was certainly part of it.
I mean, so much of that
tabletop.
really has to look at, we got to look at what the economy was doing in 2008, right? Yeah. And how much we needed the break. And if we could afford a $5 or $10 or $15 game that would give us hours and hours of enjoyment instead of going to a movie for $40 to get 2 hours and extra treadmill time, then it was a thing that, like, I think that's a no-brainer. And I think that, you know, as dumb as Americans are, as we are, you know, we're like, oh, I know my money. I know my value in this thing. And entertainment, our biggest export, like, we probably know a little something about that. So we're like, yeah, let's spend money in a more efficient way, have more fun, and actually connect a little more. Yeah. And I think that, like, and the funny thing is, since then, the movie industry like took another swing back up, like in 2012, I think. Yeah. But yeah, I think that absolutely was it. Like, let's get the most out of that money, and how do we do that? And I think that's why Gen Con, especially the documentary came out, 2008, 2009 was the Gen Con that I think it was recorded for, right? So like we got to see that, and people, I don't think a lot of people knew about like just the way that conventions worked before, and then getting it like, oh, there's other nerds.
No, I think a lot of that was the internet. Actually, obviously I've been going to this since before the internet started, but
Number
means
one,
I'm
right?
really old. But I think first of all, I thought the internet was going to kill conventions, right? Because a lot of the stuff you can do, or want to go to a convention for, you got the new stuff. That's all that's happening. I thought, you can do that at home now. Why are you going to worry about going to Gen Con? The funny part, though, is that I think the internet actually has caused these to grow because you make friends online now. You have these people you never see any other time except that one time a year. You go to Gen Con and you get to hang out with your friends. Your online friends suddenly become real friends.
And you get to maintain those relationships.
Exactly.
It's not like, there's that cool couple I ran into at that show, and then you never hope to see them again someday. Well,
exactly.
Now you can like be on Facebook together.
Exactly. That great game master you played a game with or whatever, you're like, oh, that was so much fun. And then you're Facebook friends, right? You're on Twitter or whatever. And it's nice to be able to maintain that, and it just kind of it fuses itself together, and it grows stronger every year because of that. It's just amazing, right?
Well, and you get to meet your favorite author, your favorite designer, your favorite anything really, your favorite personality, and those opportunities are things that embolden other people to join, right? And so really we're creating the snowball effect for Gen Con, for Origins, for all the other things that are coming after us by allowing, like, we see kids walking around that are like in cosplay and they're like 4, right? Yeah. Those kids are lifers. They will be here doing this stuff.
And isn't it the coolest thing that you ever saw in your life, right? You're just like, whoa.
And how many of them are going to make the next big game? And we don't even know. And one day one of us will go to their house, for something like that, and we'll see a little kid in like a Flash outfit or something like that, or like walking around as Princess Peach or whatever, just anywhere, and be like, oh, you were that kid. I actually remember you. You threw up on my shoe.
That kid, okay.
Right? There's always one.
Exactly. I think one of the other neat things about actual play we were talking about before is that Wizards has actually embraced it, right? Because it's an easy thing for a company to say, well, that's cool that the kids out there are doing that stuff, but we're just going to focus on our core business and not worry about it, right? But for Wizards to actually, I think under Mike Merles to step up and say, for Dungeons & Dragons to step up and say, this is something we really want to embrace and make a part of our strategy going forward. And that's more of a recent thing, just the last couple of years. I think that's where a lot of the magic is happening right now. That's one of the reasons it's kind of hockey sticking that way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that that's probably my field more so than just about anything at the moment of us taking those specific opportunities. And, like, I guess I pretty much owe the career that I have in gaming, at least the elevation of it, because I've had a hockey stick, right? Haha. I've also had like a nice little hockey stick in my career in design, and we just finished Eberron. That came out like a week ago, and we're selling record numbers of that on the DMs Guild and on D&D Beyond, and that's amazing because 2 years ago I didn't know that was going to be anything. I just wanted to sit and play D&D, and Satine was like, "Do you want to play online with me?" And I was like, "Yeah, whatever. I don't care," because I was used to going to conventions and playing in front of people already. Playing epics and having people encircled around the table because of the cinematic style that I used, and like, oh, I guess people do like to watch that, like on a grander scale. And I think that Mike and Jeremy and Nathan really like going through and being like, is this something that is we can help? And they've put money behind people to make their streams more successful. And like, we were fortunate that between my expertise and influence in the film industry that I already had, and then Satine's in the comic and gaming industry that she already had, that we already had kind of sponsors lined up for cameras and such. The other room, half of those cameras are ours, right? But them coming up and saying like, hey, we appreciate what you guys are doing. We appreciate the quality that you're doing at. Like, let's help you. Because we've never had anything on the style of like what Geek and Sundry has or Critical Role, because, you know, we've never had Microsoft or Legendary like throw money in there. So we're super thankful to be able to have that, and it is absolutely because the bigger gaming industry people wanted to throw money behind it and wanted to say like, you're right, this is you, and you are showing people how to play the game, and it's wonderful.
I think some of this goes back. One of the earlier winners of the Diana Jones Award was Tabletop with Will Wheaton, right?
Oh, yeah.
I think that was kind of the launch of a lot of the actual play stuff. I mean, not so much as far as D&D, although Will ended up doing some of the role-playing game sessions like that. He did a great one with Fiasco, for instance. But, you know, something would appear on that show, and suddenly the sales would go like crazy. You know, the first year, it was just a huge phenomenon for that. And to see other people take it on, and Geek and Sundry obviously has been a big part of that all the way through. So it's not like this came out of nowhere. This has just been growing the entire time. But I think it was a good year to turn around and recognize that this is just blowing up amazingly well these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors that have been converging. I don't think we can give any particular, not even Adrian Swarthout, all the credit, or even a majority of the credit. There's like several big, you know, you mentioned Tabletop, the economic conditions that was happening in 2008. You know, I like to think that, you know, I think tying this into, you know, this year is the 25th anniversary of Magic the Gathering, which is, you know, a grand old product by now, right? Jesus, like, wow.
And the first support D&D has done for it, like cross-stream.
Yes, I know, that's so exciting. Well, one thing that happened, you know, I'm doing Gen Con Insights later today, talking about Magic the Gathering, is doing a nod to the 25th anniversary and the effects that Magic had on the world, which I think were tremendous and huge. And one of those effects is that it inspired games like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh!, and which were really the first really good attempts, successes at crossing over between a deep strategy game into the mass market and going younger, and then supporting it with weekly television ads or comic cartoon series. These, I think, and these games came out in the late 90s in the US and early aughts, and have been huge at driving revenues into these two games that are close cousins to everything else that we're doing, effectively training millions of children to be gamers.
That's true.
And a lot of those come up. And so if you look at the demographics and the aging and think about it, the kids being trained in the early aughts, growing into teenagers in around the 08.
And young adults now, yeah.
Young adults. And now being old enough that they're having kids of their own. Right. And they compound that with what's called the Barbie Effect, which was identified by Mattel, you know, decades ago, which is that a big part of the Barbie business is mothers who grew up with Barbie, sharing that experience with their daughters, right? And then their daughters sharing with their daughters, passing it on. So gaming has now been growing at a compound rate. I think that's another factor, which is the Barbie effect applying to our industry of parents teaching their kids how to game and the kids teaching their kids how to game.
I think the funniest part about that is it's like these games are teaching kids that it's okay to remain kids. Like it's teaching you it's okay to keep playing. Just because you become, like, we definitely went through that 70s and 80s where it was all about turning America into the workplace, and like that strong central foundation in the 60s of that, where it's like, no, you gotta come back, we gotta, be a man about a thing, you gotta do, like all this stuff, right? And then we started to move to, right, like you gotta go be the breadwinner, and everything is serious. And what these games have done is remind us, and especially these now generations, that are coming up to say it's okay to remain a kid and to play, and there's a place for this other thing, but also when you sit down and you got the mat in front of you, like, let go of all that, be in this moment, play with this moment, and play with that person or the group of people that are at the table. That's huge.
I think games are particularly well suited to being generational, like you're talking about, because that's something you can do with your kids, right? As your kids get older, it's harder to find activities that you all want to sit down and do at the same time. But you can say, okay, it's game night, or we're going to bust out this. Maybe you're going to watch a movie or whatever. But if you're watching a movie, you're doing these passive types of entertainment. You're not actually interacting with each other. And to be able to watch your kids and play with them and teach them and see lights go off in their eyes as they realize things, it's just fantastic fun. And hopefully that's something they'll turn around and give on to their kids as well, right?
I mean, I think we're really lucky, especially with the internet, but especially with the conventions, and like you're saying, sharing it with the kids, that if we are diligent about about what we're engendering to those coming after us, and I said this last night when we got the award, I really think we can change the world with this stuff. Yeah. I really think.
I was wondering what you were saying. I could see your lips move. But
yeah, right. I'm so sorry. But that's. I think that we were so. Yeah, it was so loud, right? I really think that we're fortunate here, especially with role playing, especially with anything that reminds us of what it's like to be in that state of mind where it doesn't matter what color the person is that we were playing with. It doesn't matter gender, no gender, anything along those borderlines, like they're irrelevant. What is important is that you have a baseline for communication, and that communications-based message is let's have fun. Right. Let's not worry about all these politics or religion or anything else. Like, let us just treat each other like good people.
Right. Well, I think one of the great things about games, too, is you inhabit other people's. You inhabit other characters, right? So that helps build empathy. It helps build ways to understand other people. They always say walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. And essentially, you're walking in lots and lots and lots of shoes, right? There's a whole goddamn shoe store down there right now that we can go into at the exhibit hall. I know, I'm stretching the metaphor and beating it to death here, but...
even every character, right?
Exactly.
It's a new...
It just shows you have soul.
Oh,
ow, ow, ow.
Oh, that hurt.
You can tell who's...
Kill me now. Ouch, 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 ouch. Yeah, well, I think games are an amazing thing. Gen Con is a fantastic place. And having this actual play movement just grow as quickly as it has, it all just seems to be coming to a head, though. You're right. It's just, where do we go from here? I don't know how it's just amazing that we've even gotten to this point.
Not my monkeys, not my zoo. No.
Adrian's like, I stepped away from this.
I think it's a good question. For me, being a little bit older, and I'm not engaged with technology really actively in any type of way. So, I can barely get the WhatsApp on my phone, and I'm okay with that. I want to stay relevant enough to be able to engage in this world, and I see all these new things popping up. I can't even keep up. I wouldn't even be the person to give a glance to the direction, because I think it lives there and I think it brings all these things in, but what it is, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge for us older people, is keeping up with
with the kids,
with the
the kids today.
But it's not only just keeping aware, but the innovation is going to come. Innovation almost always comes from small companies, from young companies, and from the companies who are living and breathing passionately the latest trends and what's happening in technology and culture and science. And so the nice thing about Gen Con is we don't have to create it, we just have to feature it.
We just got to find a spot for it.
So along those lines, I do believe that the future that we're looking at is a better globalized market, like our better connectivity with the other nations that, and the move towards what I believe common will actually be, which is Google. I believe that'll be the language on people's character sheets. Eventually, it'll just be Google. But like what Satine and I noticed when we went to Europe just recently, we went and played D&D in a castle, and my mic doesn't like me, which is fine. I don't need you.
No, you're good.
You're good. So with going to play D&D in a castle, we also took some time to go and visit game stores in London. They're about the size of a closet. Then you have to go into the outskirts of London to finally get places that work. And there are some great like nonprofit organizations like RP Haven, which does their nonprofit that raises money specifically to open game space there. And so we were there for the Thirsty Dragon, see, here it going, for the Thirsty Dragon opening. And when we did that, see, this one doesn't like me either. When we did that, we got to see we got to really like meet. We did 50 interviews with people in London and France. We went and did the same thing in France. We went to game stores there, and a lot of what we were hearing was they kind of feel like they're the little brother that got left out, or like the little kid that got locked in the closet somewhere and like doesn't get to play the games with us. And they want to, and I feel like that is where we need to expand to and say, oh, no, we did not mean to leave you behind. Sorry, we just, closed the door, I guess. I don't know. Or like, but like that's one of the big things. Like there is still edition wars in France. Like there's still, like it matters, right? Like just sit down and play the game. It doesn't matter. We can all learn these things, and like they're also having some issues with like the X card and like consent and stuff like that. And those are things that not so much in England, but like France, and I'm sure that echoes through to the other countries that don't have the same attention put on it. And so I think our goal for this next couple years coming up and where our future lies is in expanding and showing the same attention to the other countries and other languages that need gaming just as much as we do, because again, it's all part of that baseline being a person and being a kid and remaining a kid. Right. We can stop wars.
That would be
literally.
Awesome.
We can do it. We can play
initiative.
Magic. We can play Magic instead of actual every
would
kid
be the
can
best.
have right. Every kid gets a starter deck, not an AK.
Exactly.
So I apologize. I need to take off.
All right, go for it.
Another thing. So thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here, Peter.
I might sneak out now too.
Are we close to how much?
We gotta
Whoa, Jesus Christ! We have about how long do we go here for? Another 10, 15 minutes?
Yeah. What do you want to talk about? I'll just sit here and talk about it. Yeah. Let's.
Okay, I'm good. Do you have to go?
I need coffee. I'm like.
I don't blame you for that. Go have coffee. Coffee is good.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for showing up. All right. So now Rudy and I are going to bullshit.
Let's talk about stuff.
Yeah, you guys will be good at it.
Yeah, well, we've got some experience. Thank you, Adrian. Good to see you. All right, so I think it's interesting to think about what the future of this is going to be, right?
Yeah.
I think you're right. I mean, if we have people care about games with the same passion they do other stuff, right? And a lot of people are like, oh, games are frivolous, they're useless, whatever. I'm like, you know what? I would much rather have a world where everybody was just concerned about games and about guns, right?
Oh yeah.
That kind of a thing. Why do we want to be in a place where we're trying to hurt each other when if I would rather we always had slow news days and the only thing we had to worry about was what the edition war was, right?
Yeah, right. Do you remember when you used to get like squirrels on skis, like water skiing on TV?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, when do you
Yeah,
get
yeah.
that anymore? It's just all like they don't have time. They don't even have time to put fluff pieces on the news anymore.
Yeah, which is sad, right? I would love to actually, have Twitch channels about games be the most important thing that was going on in anybody's day.
Absolutely.
Right? That would be a wonderful world. I mean, we can't pull that off, but the best we can do is maybe make it so that people want to do this stuff.
Yeah.
You're doing a great job with that with the Maze Arcade and the
Thank
other
you.
things that all these other guys that were here before were working on.
Do we can.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, what you're doing is you're showing people the fun in the game, right?
And we're showing them that it's for them. It's available to everyone. Like there's no part of this that is exclusive. Even like we're very big about inclusivity in general. And that's not, and the biggest thing I think that scares people about that is them going like, well, does that mean there's going to be less seats at the table? It's like, no, pull up the chair for other people. Be the person that invites them to the table. And guess what? You've added a chair. You haven't lost a chair. You can just drop in and now play with everybody. You've got more people to play with. Remember when that time when you couldn't find enough people for your table of D&D?
Exactly.
You're like scrounging and like games fall apart because somebody moved to Ohio or Minnesota or LA, and then you're like, well, we only have 2 people. Like it's not really that much of a game now. Then like, guess what?
Exactly. Grow the circle.
Invite the people in there, and then eventually, like maybe they can't do it then, but you can like ping them back later and be like, yeah, hey, now this guy's open. I just got a text message from Dingo, and he was like, I wanna get in there and play with the baby, you know, like.
Exactly. No, it's wonderful, wonderful things if we're able to be connected like that. We're able to expand things and let more people get in. I mean, obviously, I'm an old white guy, right? But I'd like to see that Gen Con has become much more inclusive over the years too. I mean, we try to work hard. I'm on the committee that also chooses the guests of honor here at the show, and I think 2 years ago we finally had gender equity. We used to have like 25 people who were guests of honor, and we ended up having 13 women and 12 men.
Nice.
Right, and we're still trying to, as far as ethnics and racial.
And now we reduced to 3.
Yeah, exactly. Now we're down to 3, so it's a little bit tougher. But we still have Anita Sarkeesian who's one of our guests of honor, right? Who's a fantastic feminist lady, and a critic. But the funny part is, the first year we had gender equity, we had trolls coming out of the woodwork just going, "What the hell's wrong with you people? You're destroying gaming." The next year, we actually had about 2/3 women, a third men, and we didn't tell anybody. We just did it.
Yeah.
And nobody complained.
Right.
Right. And suddenly it was just done. Nobody's bothering at all. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
To be able to just walk up and say, all right, now we're just going to change things. We're going to try to make things better.
Yeah, I find people can really only be so salty for so long.
You would hope so, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's funny because you'll see, like, people, actually, we're really blessed that our community is very, very good about those things and very positive. But when Critical Role first started, there were people that would go in there and grouch like for 4+ hours, and it's like, you came to do this for 4 hours? What is wrong with you? Like, how? Oh, you just need attention. Come play.
Exactly.
Come play. You need playtime. Come play. Like,
that's the right attitude, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, how can you be that pissed off about something? Right?
There's so many flavors, and you choose to be salty.
Exactly. Yeah. There we go. It's insane. I mean, why, if you have that much passion about something, could you channel that into something that was positive for you and everybody around
Make
you?
a freaking game.
Exactly. Make your own game. Honestly, make your own game.
If everybody else's
game.
sucks,
this is how most
make
creators
your own
start.
freaking game.
Well, that's how most creators start. That's how most writers start.
That's how I start.
Exactly. You look at it, you're like, God, I could do this. These guys are, I could do this. Yeah.
What do I need to learn?
Exactly.
Well, so for me, when I design towards a whole. I design towards something I'm like, what is missing here, right? And to an extent, I'm not being angry about it, but I am going like, I feel like there's something missing. What can I design towards? What is there? And then I'll start to be like, okay, so and then I'll move this around, and then I'll hey, it's got its own bubble, and it fits in between everything. And then like other people will see it, and they'll be like, I like how you, and that all that does is feed their imagination and creativity for how to do that on the next bubble they find.
Yeah, and the amazing thing of that is that a lot of people don't even know that the bubble is there, the space is there, until you point it out to them. You say, look, this was missing. I've provided this for you. Like, oh shit, you're right.
Yeah.
New games are like that, but even just new mechanics in an existing game.
Yeah.
Right? It's just amazing how that can grow. That's one of the great things about role-playing games is there's just this huge collaborative effort over decades now, right? That we're all just riffing off each other's ideas, building new additions, having more fun with it.
I mean, look at 5e, right?
Yeah,
bounded
exactly.
accuracy, all that other stuff. And so, like, we're going through this, and you have to be very careful with bounded accuracy, or you could possibly break it. But so one of the things that we were looking at when we were creating Eberron stuff and Dragon Marks is like, we need to make Dragon Marks good, but we don't need to do, like, they need to be better than just proficient in some certain things. And there's no more action points, right? Because that would step on bards. Yep. No inspiration now. What do you care if you have action points? So what we did was we made Dragon Marks have this intuition die that scales.
Nice.
So it's a D4 initially, and then if you get multiple versions of it, then it just increases to the next type. And increases the next type. And that shows that your magic, like your mark is actually getting you better magically at the skill, right? So it fits with the theme of it, but it's also that new thing that Keith and I have created to add in, and it works.
That's cool.
Without redefining 5th edition. We're not in 6th edition,
Exactly. Well, when you do something like that it just dovetails into it, and it looks like it was built for it. Looks like it's part of the original almost, right? You're like, okay, well.
People are like, oh, wow, you guys have been holding on to this for 4 years? And it's like, yes, we have.
But a lot of times you're like, no, we weren't holding on it. We're making this shit up as we go along, right? And that's the whole thing. I mean, when you're doing these games too, you're making things up as you go along. You're riffing off each other. The improv that goes into doing actual play. I think that's one of the reasons a lot of the people who are really good at doing the actual play broadcasts are these improvers or actors. A lot of times, voice actors too. They do amazing work. I mean, like the McElroy brothers do. The Adventure Zone. Comedians are working this stuff, right?
Yeah.
You'll listen to them just bullshit about anything, but then they sit down and play a game like this is even more magic.
Oh yeah,
right?
Because now you get to bullshit from somebody else's perspective.
Exactly. But I think it also shows people to not be afraid of these things. To go, oh, that seems too complicated, or that seems too weird. It's like, no, this is fun. Here, let me show you.
Yeah.
Right. And we didn't actually ever have that before. I mean, for anybody to actually see how fun a game was, you had to be invited over to somebody's house. They had to teach you how to play, or you had to come to a convention like this, and they'd show you in a room with 10,000 other people. But to be able to watch this online and be able to say, oh, this is fantastic.
Right.
And to see people really do it well. And one of the problems, I think one of the reasons that computer video games did really well and have been doing well is they've reached a point where, like World of Warcraft, was actually better than a really shitty dungeon master.
Oh yeah.
Right? Because we couldn't train dungeon masters.
Right.
But now we have a way to train them.
Right.
We have a way, by way of example, to show people how to improve.
Example. So instead of that single line narrative, right, and really just giving you the option of, well, you can do these side things in between. Now you do have dungeon masters that can fully improv everything that you're doing. Like my players think that I've laid everything out in advance. You can tell when I'm messing around. You can tell when I'm off track. When you ask me what a PC's name is and it starts with a TH. When I'm like, Lane.
There you go.
And people and they're like, oh, Thulane. Okay, I'll put that in there with, the last 5 NPCs have been Theo, Thulane.
It's a pattern. You're showing that's actually a culture where they start out. It's like the Spanish lisp. Right. You're working it. It's okay.
Yeah. But it's been really nice to would you actually mind if I brought up Nick and over
come
here?
on up.
So Nicole is somebody who we met at I think last Gen Con, and she has been very not only supportive but very interested in how to learn. Why don't you grab the one over there on Matt's other side? About how to learn game design and how to better interact with the community and all of these, and really that comes from her involvement in the community to begin with.
Okay.
And look, we're kind of like twinses. And I think that it's from her, I would love to actually hear from your perspective, like what actual play did for you. Like, did you play D&D beforehand? Did you get into it through actual play? Like, what's up?
I got started watching Critical Role because I'd always been interested in D&D because it seemed like such a fun idea, and I'd heard about it, but I didn't have anyone to teach me how to play. And some of my friends were like, oh, hey, all of these great voice actors from these shows are playing Dungeons & Dragons together, and they're playing it online. They even did a thing on how to play, and I was like, all right, this seems pretty cool, and I fell in love instantly. And I watched for a while, and then I started getting really into the community, and we talk on Twitter and talk on Twitch, and made a lot of friends, and ended up finding like we had similar things in common, and we had similar problems too, a lot of life problems, and I ended up actually getting treatment for social anxiety. And last year, I got up the courage to come to Gen Con for my first convention, which 50 was big, so it was kind of intimidating.
That's
but
the deep end of the pool. Good
yeah,
on you.
yeah. It's like, oh, you're going to Gen Con. Oh, this is your first convention. Oh, it's the 50th. Good luck. And but yeah, and so I met Rudy and Satine at the Alpha Party, and just everything kind of changed from there. Yeah. And ever since doing that, I've become more involved with the community. I watch more shows.
You started Dungeon Mastering.
I started dungeon mastering.
Writing.
Oh my God, there's so much. And now it's every single day is Dungeons and Dragons or writing or doing something. And this is, thanks to Gen Con last year, it completely changed my life. And this is now like my path.
You got a tattoo.
That's so cool.
Oh yeah,
I
I
was
got a
looking at
Dungeons
this.
and
This is
Dragons
amazing.
tattoo, yeah.
That's fantastic. That's passion. See, there we go.
And the dice actually spell out the date for when Critical Role started.
Seriously?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, fantastic.
That's awesome.
That is fantastic. Well, congratulations. I'm happy you're here. That's an amazing thing.
Thanks this guy.
It's a good story.
Well, thank this guy. Because Matt was actually one of the, when I was going through and I was learning the things that I was learning and reading through all that stuff, I would see his name constantly. and then I just happened to meet you at conventions along the way, and being involved with WotC and you still being peripheral to them, like it made it very easy for that to be an easy conversation. And obviously, like we're both just pretty excited to be around. So
Good fun.
Right. So it was just like, oh, who are you? Oh, hi. Oh, I know your name. Oh, cool. And you're like, yeah, I know your name. And I'm like, oh shit. and we've become pretty good friends from that. Like that's awesome that we just peripherally knew each other, had some mutual friends and mutual contacts, and that led into this to where, like, even for the award last night, like, you messaged me and you were just like, hey, can you show up for this? Exactly. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I think so.
Well, thank you for showing up. Actually, when we were giving out the award last night, I'm like going, we're giving out for actual play. I'm like, oh, there's not a person to give it to, right? What do we do? And then I'm like, okay, well, we need to have a few representatives, and I hope to, it's Gen Con Wednesday, so you never know who the hell's going to be there.
Right.
So it's nice to be able to say, okay, call Rudy, call Satine, call James D'Amato. Who was the other one? It was Ivan actually stepped forward and volunteered. He's like, I've been going to the Diana Jones Award for a few years. I'd be happy to. I'm like, okay, cool, come on in.
See, I didn't know we were going to win it.
Yeah, well, I did, but I was the only
Yeah,
one.
but you didn't tell me. You're just like...
No, I know. I felt bad because I'm walking around going, okay, now, if you win, I was talking to, like, the academics over here with the Analogue Games Journal. I'm like, now, if you win, I'm like going, okay, you're not going to win. I can't tell you this, but I have to play it like everybody's got the equal chance at this point. And it's always so painful, right?
Right. Well, so the way that you represented it to me is I thought you were just like, yeah, we don't have anybody to represent actual play. And I was like, oh, okay. And I'm thinking to myself, so I think like Critical Role is going to win an award, and I have to go, like, I'm going to go and accept a reward for Critical Role.
No,
okay,
but we
sure.
didn't pick out Critical Role. We didn't pick out Maze Arcane. We didn't pick out any of these shows because we want it to be for the whole movement, right? We want it to be for everybody because I think it's bigger than just one particular show, right?
And to be fair, I think that they would have been fine with me doing it, and I would have been fine doing that too because we're all friends. But it would have been, I was like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll be there. Whatever you need, Matt. And that was the thing. It was because we had that.
Exactly.
I was just like, whatever you need, dude, I'll show up.
Exactly. It's going to be a party. We'll have some fun. We'll enjoy ourselves. Were you there last night?
Yep, I was.
There you go. I'm pretty sure you were, but it's like 400 people go past me. It becomes a blur after a while.
Yeah.
So it's too much fun. I have a question for the people we're doing this for. When do we have to get off the stage?
9 minutes at least.
Or do we go to the end, or do we have to clear off ahead of time to make up for the next people? Oh, there's a half-hour block. Great. Okay, good.
Yeah, so we could
That's what I was asking about. Okay. Because actually, I have a panel at noon, but I'll just hustle over. It's at the Marriott. So.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's not too far. We could also do like I don't know if there's even anybody in chat, but if there are, we could answer questions real fast.
Is there anybody in chat? Do we know how to check this stuff?
Yeah. The Gen Con official one. Yeah.
There we go. Official Gen Con.
So if you are not here, you're not going to hear this. But if you are, why don't you go ahead and ask us a question or two? I think we've got a few minutes so we can do a thing before he has to.
Definitely.
And it's not hot enough outside for you to sweat going between here and the Marriott. Like it's not that far.
It's not. No, it's easy.
Yeah, but feel free to get up and leave. Like I'll just.
Are you just kicking me out? Are you kicking me out? Are you kicking me out? No.
Not of your own show. No, I would never. Cool.
There's actually people watching us. That's great.
Well, that's okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, there's about a 15-second delay usually,
okay.
And that's a baseline, and depends on if they've made it any longer. Sometimes it can be a couple minutes.
Yeah.
It helps with video sync issues.
I'm learning here.
Yeah.
Actually, I put on Twitter yesterday and on Facebook. I'm like, I've got 5 kids, and they're always hassling me to run a Dungeons & Dragons campaign with them, which I've never managed to pull off.
What?
We do like one-shots
kids?
all the time. We do all sorts of different games, but we haven't actually sat down and done a campaign. Right? So I'm like, maybe we should do an actual play and see if. But now I have to figure out how to produce something like that.
Oh no,
Right?
it's such a pain in the ass. Let me
See,
tell
there
you.
you go.
People like. We do. Satine and I have been going around to teach how to live stream for the last 2 years. Like that's part of our outreach stuff for community things. And one of the things, like when people want to get serious about it, I'm like, okay, so if you're going to be serious about it, great, do it. It's really hard to do this kind of a thing part time. And I say the same thing that I get when I got into the film industry, which was. If you can possibly do anything else, do that first.
Yes. What kind of stuff is going to be on the stream? Actually, Gen Con's got a whole bunch of stuff coming up for the entire weekend. I know that we're going to be streaming the guest of honor speeches later on in the day. We're also have this new thing called Gen Con Insights, which is a new kind of a TED Talk program that we're doing. And we have, who are the speakers this year? It's Shauna Germain, Ben Dobbins, and I'm missing the third one. My brain's shot right now.
Well.
But those guys are actually, it starts, I believe, 5 o'clock tonight. We're going to be doing 18-minute presentations. Oh, and Peter's the other one. There you go, Peter Atkinson.
I forgot that guy, too.
Who? You know, the guy who founded Wizards of the Coast and no one's Gen Con with Adrian. So, we'll be doing that, I think, at 5 o'clock tonight, Eastern Time. And that's going to be a lot of fun. We're actually hoping to expand that to do like 10 or 20 of them next year. This is just a pilot program for that goes along with the Guest of Honor stuff. But this is a brand new Twitch stage. They've never done this kind of stuff before.
Right, because we helped set it up.
Exactly. There we go. Rudy knows everything.
I did a lot of the legwork for some of this stuff along with Eric Benson and Derek Gooter, and our awesome, we call it the Maze Arcana Midwest Division, is Bill Allen and his crew that come in. And so we help set up this and also the other stream, which is called Gen Con Studio. And what we're doing over there is we're demoing games for new exhibitors and new vendors who want to come in and show their games off and give people a little bit of an idea of what they're looking at. But then here, along with those, we're also doing actual play. So you'll be able to watch me and the Maze Arcana crew. You'll be able to see Adam Coble run some stuff. We have a good bit of lineup of people coming in every night, pretty much from I think about 4 or 5 o'clock every day through about 10, and in one case is midnight. Yeah, and the schedule is apparently on the Switch page if you scroll down. So we could have answered that question a lot faster.
We have another question. What's the biggest barrier to content creators from different channels working together, and how can we overcome those?
Time. Time is specifically the biggest barrier in moving back and forth. Time and the legal system, because I spend as the left brain. No, as the right brain. Which brain am I that does contracts? Okay, as the right brain of Maze Arcana, I am the one that spends, I would say, 70% of my time writing contracts. So yes, I wrote Eberron with 15% of my time. That's what I thought. So the left side, which is fine, it's opposite of me because I'm left-handed, right? But I had to force myself to go from being mostly a creative person to being a litigious person, because I need to make sure that all of our contracts protect the people that are under our umbrella and are fair to the people that want to come in and play or want us to run their stuff or whatever those things are. So I would say the biggest issue with cross-stream stuff is not the desire, because we actually all love playing together. We all want to do these things together. But it's about making sure that at the end of the day, somebody's not coming in, spending all of this time, which is their most precious resource, spending all of this time doing all these other things and walking away with nothing. We don't, and one person walking away with everything. We want to make sure that everybody's taken care of and that this industry as a whole rises, and not one person, slyly keeping the revenue from everything. We want to make sure that it's fair, and that everybody gets that same opportunity. And so that's probably the biggest issue that we run into, is trying to make sure there's enough time, because I can't quite afford lawyers yet, so I can't quite have anybody else do it. I can afford a lawyer to look over the contract I've written. Right. I can't afford a lawyer to write it yet.
No, my father was an attorney. He's like, you can't afford a lawyer until you're going to have to afford a lawyer, right?
Exactly.
Unfortunately, he trained me how to read and write contracts, so I do that myself too.
High five.
There we go. Boom. Well, if you don't do this stuff, you don't get it right, you're going to end up in court later.
Yeah.
Right? And you'd much rather have everybody understand exactly what's going on and have it all be up front and written down, even if it's just a deal memo so that everybody knows what you're getting into, and not having people say, oh, but I thought I owned that, or
right.
No, that's mine.
Problems, and we still have problems with that, regardless of whether or not you start those things. And even if anybody gets upset that you want to have a contract, that's a good flag that you don't actually want to be in a business
No,
with
exactly.
that person.
Well, my dad used to tell me you have contracts for when things go right. When everything's going right, and there's lots of money flowing, and there's no problems. Nobody pays attention to the contract.
Right.
Contracts are for when things go wrong.
Right. Contracts keep friends.
Exactly, they do. Right. At the end of the day, you can say, okay, we already agreed what's going to happen here. We know how this is going to. If it dissolves or it goes bad, we know how it's going to go bad.
Right.
If it goes well, we know how it's going to go well.
Right.
So we have our expectations all defined properly.
And they're just mechanics anyway.
It's like a game, really.
It
in a lot
is a
of ways,
game.
Right?
It really is. The legal system's not that. Like, Alexander Hamilton might be the best game designer ever.
I think you're right. Yeah,
He might be.
I often think if we just set game designers into politics, it'd be a very interesting.
Dude, I would rock it.
There you go. You should run. You should run.
Well, I'm a little busy running
Yeah,
other
yeah,
things.
yeah. Things like that.
But that's not to say I won't. That's to say that.
He's announcing his candidacy today.
Yeah, I'm announcing my candidacy.
That's right.
President 2020. America, you need to look with 2020 vision.
You can root for Rudy.
Boom. Yeah, I feel like I'm going to need a little bit more clout first.
Okay.
but we'll work on that. And I think if we get all of Gen Con behind us and we get the entire convention circuit voting, then we're going to pull a
That's
good
a
bit
lot.
of
They
that.
actually have like 3 different organizations here at the show registering voters.
Wow.
There's Nerds Vote. There's another one that's like a local Indiana one, and the third one that's actually in a hallway between here and the Lucas Oil Stadium.
See, the hard part is that I really don't want to have my politics in my gaming, and that's
I know. Because a lot of this is escapism, right? That's
Right.
what you're really here to do. You're here to escape. And to actually, as important as politics are to me, I think it's a good thing to be able to just set them aside and relate to people directly and understand why you like each other. Right, and not worry about the things you're arguing about. But then, you also got to go out there and march and fight and advocate
Exactly.
for things later as well. I don't think Gen Con is a safe space, but I think it's a place where we get to focus on the fun stuff for a while.
Well, all we need is love.
We have time for one more question.
All right.
And I assume it's aimed toward Rudy. Where did you get that amazing vest? Not that Nicole's vest isn't nice, but.
It's a little, this is more design.
So, this vest is a custom piece that I had commissioned. So actually, the frame of the vest is my grandfather's. It's a hand-me-down. When he died, he left it to me because he knew how much I liked the vest, and we were both military men. So there was no money because we were both military men, but what he did have was some really nice suit pieces that he had for special occasions, going to other officer parties and stuff like that. And so he gave me, this is one of the vests that he gave me. And when it was too big, because he was like 6'5" Italian dude. Yeah, like big dude. And a drill sergeant. So think about how freaking intimidating that is.
Perfect.
Yeah, I grew up, I did not have the same kind of grandparents that everybody else has. Let me tell you that. So when he passed on, he left this to me, and when D&D had the maps for Tomb of Horrors, they made these like silk cloth maps, and I was like, oh my God, I want one. They feel so nice. And then it's special to me because of my grandfather, but also because the very first work that I did for WotC, and I was telling you this last night, the very first thing I did was I rewrote Gary Gygax's poem for Tomb of Horrors. So because they made this thing, I had the vest commissioned. It was not cheap, but it has raised enough awareness, I think, that people are like, can we start getting those? So I think I'm going to see if I can get these made to the point where they can be cheap. Yes. And I'm going to start doing some Dapper DM wear or something like that.
That would be awesome.
I think so. I think it'd be fun.
I think we're done then, right?
I think we're done with you.
Woo! All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Nicole?
Thank you very much for having me up here.
Rudy?
Senor.
Thank you very much. I have to go run to do a writing symposium panel, but come back in a half hour and watch more of this stuff. Then we'll have other stuff you can look down in the doobly-doo. Running Dread.
Oh, he's
next.
running Dread here?
Fantastic.
So Ivan's running Dread.
Stick around for that.
I don't know which one of those things I feel like a writing symposium with you on it is worthwhile.
There we go. All right. Thank you, everybody.